Welcome back, junkies. This is the Daily Wealth Junkies Show. I'm Brandon Dukeman here with Will Harvey, and thanks for joining us today. Before we get started, don't forget, follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/wealth junkies. And don't forget to subscribe to the show so that you're not missing any of our daily episodes, and rate and comment on the episodes so that our guests know how they're doing and we know how we're doing. And with that, I'm going to toss it right over to Will, and he's going to introduce our guest for the day.
Thanks, Brandon. Today we have Eric Rosenberg on the show. So he is a person. He is a personal finance. Sorry about that. I'm stuttering. Personal finance and business freelance writer, and he has a background in corporate finance. He has both an undergrad and MBA in finance as well, so he knows a thing or two about finance. And he spent about 10 years in cubicle-land, as he describes it, before jumping out on his own and doing everything that he is doing now. So, Eric, with that, thanks so much for coming on our show. And can you just give the listeners a little bit more about your background and what got you to where you are today?
Sure. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely.
So my background, you did a pretty good job describing the general journey. I went to college like a lot of people in this country do. Grew up in typical American suburb. I went to the University of Colorado and got my undergrad in finance there. And my first job after college was a bank manager. I thought I'm trying to think of a movie with a banker, but one's not popping into my head. But that's what I was trying to do, like be the cool banker that was in my head. And the bank wasn't as great as I thought it'd be.
Money, yeah, it's like
right.
Right.
So I wanted to be the man. When people like down with the man, I'm like, no, I want to be the man.
Right.
So I worked at a bank and I was the man for a little while, but I found out it was not all it was cracked up to be. It was a long, 7 to 7 kind of days. They were about to add Saturdays. It just wasn't. It wasn't the day-to-day I wanted, but I learned so much when I was there. I learned all about credit reports. I was approving mortgages and new credit card applications. I was running the new accounts department and the teller line and customer service. So pretty much anything that happened day-to-day in a bank that you might need to do, I was running that. I had to learn how to do it. So when I left the bank, I had a few months as a waiter, as some people do, was learning how to bus tables and deliver food. We got to make money somehow. And
that public service is always great, right? Dealing with
I'm glad I had the experience. It was a good thing to do. I wouldn't knock it. But when I was in there, I applied and got into an MBA program, decided that was always something I wanted to do, and also got a job as a financial analyst. That was my first gray cubicle experience. And I was lucky to be at a great company with, more importantly, a great boss that let me work full-time while I got my MBA full-time. So I wasn't doing a whole lot outside of work and school those days. My girlfriend at the time could probably testify she wasn't getting that much attention. And maybe that was
you got to focus on the career.
But yeah, I was working hard.
That's right. That's why she was the girlfriend at the time.
Yeah. Let's go with that one. Yeah.
Right.
But I learned a ton. Again, I got those credentials. When I went to get the MBA, the credential was a big part of it. I already had a finance degree, so I was like, what am I going to learn about the stock market that I didn't already learn? And of course, there were things I could learn. I learned a lot, made some great connections that eventually led to future jobs and things like that. But at the same time, I had this little side hustle I started right after I quit working in the bank. So I've been reading these personal finance blogs. Obviously, I'm kind of into finance, into money. So I was reading personal finance blogs, and there were some about frugality, and a lot were by people who were in a bunch of debt and were trying to tell their story about how they were getting out of debt. And I started thinking, well, I've never been in debt. And I got out of college debt-free. I was at the early wave of people getting these crazy student loans. That's kind of where my age came in. College was going up 20% a year in cost, but I had a full ride scholarship from the Boy Scouts. So got out of college debt free, and I had just been approving mortgages. So I thought, well, geez, I should be the one writing about money, not all these people in credit card debt.
Right.
So I started a little personal finance blog. That is today Personal Profitability. It's like 11 years old this month. Actually, about a week or two ago, it turned 11. So it's been around a while. And when I started that blog, I didn't realize, I could have hoped that it might have led to a full-time income someday. There were a few online bloggers making all this money, but it was still a pretty new time in the world of blogging. I'm kind of a dinosaur in blog years, being around as long as I was.
Absolutely, that's a long time.
but I started getting involved in these communities of online personal finance bloggers. Some of those people in credit card debt ended up becoming really good friends, as did other personal finance bloggers. And by getting involved in a community, I learned how to turn that little hobby that I was so excited. I'll never forget the first time I got a $10 ad and I was able to go to the bar down the block and get a beer with the money I earned online.
That's awesome.
This is so cool, right? But then after I learned how to take it from this little, .blogspot.com thing and made it into, a real respectable website, that I was publishing on regularly, that changed my online income from, excited to make $5 or $10 here and there to I'm covering all of my bar tabs every month. And that was saying something in my mid-20s. I was a big nightclubber. And then it grew to covering my rent and eventually my mortgage. And it just kept growing and growing. And a big part of that was being a part of communities and just focusing on what works. That's something I tell any entrepreneur, anyone who's trying to build or start a business. Look at what's working and do that again and again and again, even if it's not what you expected or wanted to be the thing that's working. Now, if you're listening to a podcast about money, maybe you've heard of Pat Flynn. I'm lucky to be buddies with him. He's a great guy. And I thought, I'm going to do exactly what he's doing. That's perfect. I'm going to have this huge website. Millions of people are going to come every month. Every once in a while, someone will recognize me at an airport, and I'll be like, hey, that's cool. But mostly I'll be making 6 figures a month online and ride off into the sunset in my yacht. But Pat doesn't have a yacht. I think he does have a Tesla. That was kind of cool. But Google had different plans for me. Google didn't think I should get millions of visits a month. But by going to these conferences about personal finance, namely FinCon, that's the big one I go to every year. I've been 9 times. I've been to every single one. Wow. Highly recommend it if you're into finance, media, blogging, podcasting, or video. Anything finance and online media it's a great place to be. And I started meeting.
Location of that rotate, or is it same place every?
Yes, it moves every year. Okay. It was actually just about a month ago in Washington D.C. this year. Okay. Next year it'll be in the fall in Long Beach, so out of my side of the country.
Awesome,
which is nice. About a 3-hour drive for me, depending on traffic.
Yeah, not a 6-hour flight.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So, but I met all these companies there at FinCon. Some like the first one that was a big company you probably heard of that took a bet on me was Betterment. I wrote my first freelance article for them after I'd written for some smaller sites. And I realized, I thought, the Pat Flynn route was going to work for me and I was going to have all these affiliate dollars coming in. It was this freelancing thing that started working for me. So rather than focusing on what wasn't working, I started focusing on what was working, on those freelance dollars. And that grew and grew and grew. And that's where things really took off. In I think it was April, let's have to think back a little bit. 2015, I did 40,000 in revenue online on the side. And that was, I'm guessing, around 20 hours a week. It was probably more, but ballpark half time because I had a full-time job. And I realized I was living in Portland then. The average person in Portland makes like 40,000 a year. I thought if I can do this on the side part-time, imagine what would do if I did this 40 or 50 hours a week instead of having a job, which I was doing really well. I was a senior financial analyst, good benefits, health insurance. That health insurance is hugely valuable. I'm about to have another kid and it'll be about $2,000 a month. So health insurance is a big deal.
Get dogs instead. Dogs are a lot cheaper.
Don't get dogs either. I have 2 dogs.
Don't do any of it. Just stay single. Just keep
stay single. Yeah, if I were single, making what I make today online, man, I'd be. But that's not what I want to do. I don't need to go partying. I'm very happy to have my kids, but I'm not a dog person. My wife's the dog person. But sometimes they bark when I'm writing.
Yes, but, sometimes mine barks while we're recording. So
I've been there. I call Yogi and Tribble my co-hosts.
Yeah,
that's hilarious
when they pop up. But what happened? Over the years, I had that $40,000 year, and I thought, I'm like any good smart dad. At that point, I had a 6-month-old daughter. My wife was a stay-at-home mom. I thought, I'm going to quit my job, sell my house, and move to one of the most expensive parts of the country. So
why not?
Here I am in Southern California. It's about 3.5 years later, and my income has only exploded since I went full time, which is kind of what you would expect, but it didn't happen right away. It wasn't instant. Right when I left my job, it was beginning of 2016. April 2016 was when I took the big jump and moved from Portland down to California, closer to my in-laws, which, living about a half hour from your in-laws is the perfect distance. If anyone's wondering, they're far enough that they don't just drop in unannounced. It's not like Everybody Loves Raymond, but they're close enough if you need babysitting or you want to see them. It's an easy trip.
Right.
So a little life tip there for any entrepreneurs.
They're not going to call you and ask you to help them move a refrigerator or something like that, or it's like far
can
enough.
I borrow butter?
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Move a refrigerator, I'll drive over, but like borrowing sugar, just ask your next door neighbor.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly.
But so we're doing great down here.
Awesome.
So what happened, I noticed when I left the job, I was making a big part of my income from doing freelance website development for WordPress. So a lot of those people in the FinCon community, I was a bit of a hacker geek, learned how to code websites on my own, built my own sites in WordPress, and started developing my own themes and started helping friends do it, and then started charging people to do it. So that became a big part of my business when I quit my job. So it was writing and the website development were the two big things. But I was looking at my QuickBooks because, accounting background. I spent some time, more than a little bit of time, looking at my books and making those nice. And I noticed something. If you guys know the 80-20 rule, principle, it kind of smacked me in the face from the computer screen. I was making 76% of my revenue from writing, and that was taking about 20% of my time. And the website development was like 17% of my revenue, taking about 80% of my time and probably giving me 90% of my stress. So it was just like, wow, this clearly the writing is what I need to be doing.
Right.
And I was a little nervous because my, California is more expensive than Portland. So income was a little tight right when I left the job. Yeah. And I just chopped off the website development part of my business. I said, I'm not doing it anymore. I emailed my recurring monthly clients and found them someone else to do maintenance services on their sites, and I started turning away work there. So my income did go down a little bit, but that put me really focused on writing. And in the next 2 months, my income roughly tripled to over $10,000 a month for the first time. Wow. And it has been over that mark every single month since, except two. One, I had a daughter born when we were evacuated from a fire, and the other,
oh wow,
I don't know, I think it was the holidays or just a low summer month, but making $9,000 in a month's nothing to be ashamed of.
That's nothing to get upset about.
So, so the business, by focusing on what works and repeating, I've been able to build this great business. I have a history of income reports at personalprofitability.com if anyone wants to check it out, for like 7 years of income. I stopped them at the end of last year when I felt like I kind of proved what I was trying to prove after a few years.
That's awesome.
That's the story. That's what led me to where I am. And now I'm still a side hustler. I have a couple little projects I'm working on, but the freelance writing is the main thing. It gives me the freedom to work wherever and whenever I want, as long as I'm meeting my client deadlines. And it's kind of like living the dream, I guess. Right?
That's
Here I am.
Cool.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So what gave you you just started doing that. You had no idea it was going to blossom into what it is now, is that right?
Yeah, like I said, I kind of hoped that it might lead to me being like, at that point, I was looking at like Pro Blogger from Darren Rouse and a few other big sites. I was like, wow, these bloggers, they're like really doing something. And I'd started a little blog about Israel and the Middle East before my finance blog. So I'd had a little blogging experience just for fun. I wasn't going to make anything, grading my opinions about the political situation in Israel. Right. But it gave me some practice writing. It was a little motivation, a little wind in my sails. And when I started seeing a little bit of money from AdSense, I thought, well, if I start something finance focused, maybe I'll make a few dollars, pay off my my car loan, which I paid it off way early. Eventually I did get student loans with the MBA, and the blog income certainly helped. Every dollar helps. You're writing about personal finance. I mean, you definitely know, save a penny saved is a penny earned, right?
Yeah,
That's a good saying. But a penny earned on top of a penny earned means you have two pennies. And I'd rather earn more, exponentially than try to save a little bit here and there. So that's where I focused my efforts, and my blog was really into the earning side and building side hustles and building businesses. Because if you're working for someone else, they get to keep all the profits, right? You're going to make, maybe you'll make some good money. If you do really well, you can, you have CEO in your name of your business. If you get to that top rank, you'll probably do pretty well. But even CEOs of a lot of mid-sized companies that make millions of dollars a year are still, they'll make, only, 100, 200,000 a year.
Right.
If you own a business and it makes 500,000 a year, even though that might be way smaller than some mid-sized business that makes 10, 20 million a year, if you get to keep more of it, you're in a better position, right?
That's right.
So
Absolutely.
would you rather work for yourself and keep the profits, or work for someone else and give them the profits and hopefully get a little slice of it? Ideally, you can use that time working for someone else to build your own thing and eventually take the leap like I did. I didn't jump with no net. I didn't jump without somewhere to land. I had that $40,000 income the year before. So I had a pretty good idea it was going to work. But that took 8 years of hard work to build up before I was the overnight success. So remember, you see a lot of people online who might make 6, 7 figures, but you don't see all the years they put in behind the scenes making that happen. And that's where we all are now, is building that up. So I spent a lot of years, before we started recording, I spent 10 years doing long commutes, sometime in the snow, trying to think about, what would I do? Waking up to my alarm and thinking, I'm going to go sit in a cubicle and have meetings today. And that's what my day is going to look like. These days I wake up with no alarm. I control my schedule. It is an attainable dream. It is something you can do, but it does take a lot of work to get there.
Well, can you explain? No, that's awesome. Can you explain some of the steps you took aside from, what did you do to, it sounds like you're a pretty smart guy when it comes to finances. You've never really been in personal debt or anything like that. So what were some of the things that you did in terms of setting money aside, all of that, just to prepare for your exit?
Sure. Yeah. So that's a great question.
Life. Yeah.
So there were a couple different things going on. There's a few different pieces of that puzzle, I guess, to answer. So one was, where to put money to build your business. I know, capital's also part of your company name. I was, the business I picked, the only capital I really needed was a laptop, which I had anyway. If we're doing this, for the podcast, eventually I did invest. This is a not inexpensive microphone, and I have mixers and cameras and all sorts of stuff around the office. But in the beginning, I was really nervous to spend $10 to buy a domain name, or $8, whatever it was then, on GoDaddy, which is like the only place back then that anyone was buying domain names. So I was at .blogspot.com, and I still know people, and I've had this discussion a lot of times now, where I said, you're willing to spend 10 hours, 20 hours a week writing this blog, and you won't put $10 a year into it, less than $1 a month, to just have your own name.com. So, but in the very beginning, that was my mindset. I thought, well, until my website makes $10, I'm not going to spend $10 on it. But if you look at the most successful businesses, rarely could you bootstrap it unless it's a really tech thing and your brain is the asset, creating something, creating software or website. Most people have to put money into a business. So when I did start to invest, that's where it really started to grow, but you have to invest strategically. One of the biggest and best decisions I made was, I said, if my website makes enough to pay for me to go to that first FinCon, which was in Chicago, and I was in Denver, it was a flight, a hotel, going to see 100 to 200 people that I'd never met before, other than maybe in some online forum. But 10 years ago, that was still kind of maybe a little sketchy to go meet people. There was no such thing as Tinder. Online dating was very new.
Craigslist.
So I was like, do I go do this? Go to this conference that's never happened before with a bunch of people I don't really know, and spend $1,000, $1,500 to do it. And that was such a great decision, because that's really what led to those connections that started the freelancing. If I hadn't been at that conference, I would definitely not have the freelance clients I have today. And if I don't keep going every year, I wouldn't keep getting new and better clients. Now I make about 20 times per article what I did for my first article. And that didn't happen. Again, that wasn't overnight. That wasn't an accident either. It took years. And networking and building that business. So for the kind of business I own, if you're in real estate, you have to put dollar equity in to get the house. Or maybe let's say you're doing fix and flips, and you have to put a ton of money in, and then your sweat equity to do the rehab if you're doing it yourself. The business I have, it's almost 100% sweat equity. It's built on your reputation. Mm-hmm. It's built on something that I create, a service I provide. And this keyboard sitting right here, this is my main tool I use every day.
Yeah.
And now, now my business is big enough that that cost to go to the first FinCon is just like a drop in the bucket for my business.
Yeah,
I spend per year on my business, I don't know, half of what I made my first year of my first job.
Oh, wow.
Spending 5 figures on something, that's like a lot of money, right? I mean, I could buy a car for what I spend on my business, but if I don't spend that on my business, I wouldn't have the income to show for it.
And you can't grow and
so you can't scale it.
I like that. Like you said that, you were scared, not necessarily scared, but just hesitant to spend, just $10 on a domain name, which, I've run into that before too. One of the courses that really got me into, the multifamily real estate that we do was like $2,000. And I kicked it around for, over a week because I was hesitant to spend $2,000 on something that, would advance my future and the company. But do I want to spend $2,000 on something? And, obviously that's a little bit more than $10, but it's, same
how
thing.
many days of work does it take to cover $2,000?
Yeah,
that's how I used to think of things. I was like, how many days of sitting in that cubicle does it take to pay for that vacation I want, or that event, that concert I want to go to, or that car I want, whatever it is. And that's how I used to think of it. Now it's, I think, how many articles.
Yeah.
So I still have an anchor point. It's like, how many articles would it take for me to, go take my wife to Mexico? I could figure that out. But it's, cool. There's always somewhere in our journey, we have an anchor that we think like, how much of this does it take to get whatever I want? And is it worth it? Right. That's
right.
And for my business, investing has definitely been worth it. There have been things I bought that didn't pay off. I lost $2,000 with a friend. We bought a reusable bag store website. And, one of the lessons we learned is that you probably won't be able to make a lot of money selling something online that someone could get at the grocery checkout counter for $1.
Yeah.
But at the time, like reusable bags were like this big new thing, and all these states and cities were starting to ban plastic bags. Like, it seems like a good business. So everything doesn't work out great, but because other parts of my business were working well, that $2,000 or $1,000 for me, $1,000 for my friend didn't sting that bad.
Right.
Well, and
it still stings a little, but
when it's something like that, there was a deal I was under contract on just personally, and I spent $8,000 in attorney fees, and it hurt so bad. But that was such a big lesson. Looking back, once I was not pissed off and just wanted to quit everything, looking back, it just taught me, first off, how attorneys work. It was my first time dealing with one, and I just learned that they bill you for everything. You send them an email, they bill you 6 minutes. So learning all that, it was so valuable. And I'm sure for you, with the whole the bag thing, spending $2,000, that's a lesson where if you're looking at something to invest in, you're now going to look at it with the knowledge and experience gained from that quote unquote failure. You'll make a better decision next time. So
every failure is a good lesson in business. I think I saw a poster they used to have up in all the elementary and middle schools about how Abe Lincoln failed at like 47 things before he became president. Failing's a part of succeeding.
Business,
so don't be afraid to fail.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That's right.
So you said it took you about 8 years to build up the income to the point where you were comfortable leaving your job. Was there ever a point within those 8 years that you're like, what I'm doing is probably not worth it, or kind of a lot of self-doubt, or was this, hey, this is going to work? I see it progressing? Or
I'd say I didn't think I was going to really go full time until about 90 seconds before I told my boss I was quitting my job. Until then, I had every doubt still.
Yeah.
And there was one point I lost a job, not of my own choice, that I thought, this is like my moment. I'm going full time right now. Like it's destiny. Today is the day. But then destiny had an email show up in my inbox from a recruiter with a job closer to home that paid more. with better hours and a better boss. So sometimes you have to look at destiny. So I was close one time before I really did it. That was about 2 years before I pulled the plug and really went out on my own. But there were a lot of the time, I genuinely meant even a year before, yeah, it'd be fun to do someday. I guess it'd be kind of a cool dream to go out on my own. But why would I walk away from this great career that I've spent so much time building? But I guess it was actually in the book, The Art of Nonconformity, Chris Golobo said to make a major life change like I did when I quit my job, or sometimes it's moving to another city or another state, some major change. It either takes the grass being greener on the other side so much that you're willing to throw away what you have now, or your situation you have now being so bad you just want to escape it. And those are the two reasons someone would make a huge change, because people are comfortable. People don't want to change, right? But for me, it was definitely the grass is so green. This opportunity is so cool, because I did have the American dream. I had a nice house in Portland with the stay-at-home mom wife thing and 2 dogs and 1.7 kids. Yeah, like everything America wants, right? And I had to say, am I willing to just risk never having this again? I mean, of course, my wife wasn't going to leave me because I quit my job. Am I going to risk this major income change? I was saving 20-30% of my income automatically. All those things that you would hope to be able to do. I was like, am I ever going to be able to get this back if it doesn't work? Will this not work? There was a huge chance it might not work. So yeah, that was a big risk. My dad told me I was crazy to do it. My uncle called me and was like, this is the craziest thing I've ever heard in my life. You have these degrees and this great job. Why would you ever leave it? But now I laugh at what my uncle said to me, because my income is, I don't know, last year I made about double what I did my last year as a senior financial analyst.
So let me ask, are your dad and uncle, do they have normal W-2 jobs?
My dad was an entrepreneur for a while, but mostly had a regular job. My uncle always owned his own business my whole life. So you would think people who've owned their own business would be more encouraging, but they also understand the risks.
Absolutely. Yeah, so I was curious to see if they just didn't have the same mindset as you or kind of vision as you to
and my mom and my wife were the two that said, everything you've ever put your mind to, you've been able to figure out. So if you say you're going to do it, you're going to do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's right. I remember.
They were the ones.
Yeah.
I remind them, like, thank you to the two that were supportive, and rub it in your face to the two that weren't.
Yeah. Sometimes the ones that tell you not to do something or tell you won't be able to do something, that they're more, that's more encouragement and fuels
motivation.
It fuels you more than the ones that are encouraging you. I remember when I was toying around with leaving the mortgage business, which was a multiple 6-figure a job. Everybody was telling me, you're crazy, you're an idiot, you're in your 20s and making good money. Why would you throw that all away? And it just wasn't what I wanted to do. And then I talked to somebody, and they were so encouraging. It was this woman, and she was like, I told her that everybody was telling me that I'm crazy and all that stuff. And she was like, well, you know what? When people tell you that something is crazy, usually that means that it's a really, really good idea. And I was like, that was so impactful for me. She basically was saying, you're on to something. When people start doubting you and telling you something is nuts, it's like, you're on to something, you're going to do something bigger than a lot of the others.
Yeah, that, or it's actually really crazy and it ends up burning. But
for me, the way I'd looked at it, because I'd already built that $40,000 a year landing pad, I thought the worst case, I could live in a small apartment and make $40,000.
Yeah.
And that'd be fine. I mean, the worst case is not that bad. That's the average, average income. So not a horrible thing if I just do average for a year or so.
Right.
But the upside, it's unlimited, and that's something it's a personal finance concept I talk about a lot. You can budget so much, right? You can. I actually think about it a lot like dieting and exercise for health. a limited number of inputs, but, or sorry, reverse that. Your inputs can be unlimited, your output is limited, right? So with
Yeah.
dieting and exercise, you could spend 12 hours on the treadmill a day, but if you get off and just eat 50 pizzas and 10 cakes, you're going to keep gaining weight. It doesn't matter how much you exercise because you have finite opportunity to exercise. Same things with your money. You can budget so much. I can get a cheaper house, a cheaper car, save money on my insurance, get cheaper groceries. There's always places you can save, but there's going to be a point like you have to eat. You have to have a place to live. You have to have clothes. You're going to hit a limit where you're going to work really, really hard to save another nickel or another dime. Whereas your income, that can go forever, just like, pizza and cake. You can earn and earn and earn, and there's no limit to what you can earn. There are limits to what you can budget. So when you're thinking about your business and all that, think about your unlimited inputs, and that's your big opportunity.
Yeah, that's how you, instead of trying to cut expenses and nickel and dime things like that, think on the other side where how much can I make? What can I do to grow the revenue? And looking back at when you left your job and just where you are now, I mean, do you have any regrets about when you left? Should you have done it sooner, or like, how do you feel about everything that happened?
I think it happened in a good way. Ultimately, I probably could have done it sooner and been fine. When I looked back, there was a point right around when I was, 26, 27, before, or right around the time I met my wife, that if I'd really, really gone all in then, looking back, I had the knowledge and skills that I could have, thrown my life in a backpack and just lived in Europe, going hostel to hostel for a year or two. And that would have worked. I definitely have the ability to do that now, except, I have kids and a wife, so I don't have the ability to do that now. I have to worry about school schedules. But so I do look back and think about that every once in a while. But overall, I think the journey was as it was meant to be. If I had left earlier, who knows? I might have. Yeah, I don't know. There's so many what ifs, right? The insurance might not have worked out right when I had my kids, my first kid. Maybe I wouldn't have had that client I really needed at the right moment. Where now, because I've spent those years building relationships, going to those conferences, even if my biggest client were to write me an email right now and say, we're done, I'd go, for a minute, but I'd calm down and I'd send 5 or 6 emails and I'd have it fixed in probably an hour. So I didn't always have that ability, and now I do.
The reason I asked that question is not to point at your past and say you should have done anything differently.
Oh yeah.
I just always find it interesting when asking people that, if someone's sitting, if they're at their job, someone listening right now is at a job and they hate it and they want to do something. Maybe they've been kind of nervous about it for a while. And I always am fascinated by this question, because most people do say that they probably could have jumped out sooner.
For me, it was, I waited for the $40,000 sign that we keep talking about. But I probably, if I had done it at, a year or two before, I think I made about 25, 30,000 online.
Yeah.
If I had left then and tripled it to 75,000 versus I left and I did 40,000 and tripled it to like 120,000. Yeah, I could have tripled it to 75,000. I would have been just fine.
Right.
So looking back, if I had a similar result when I left at an earlier point, I probably would have been just fine. But
I love that.
I knew, and I'm conservative when it comes to losing money and risking
finance guy, so
my entire life.
You have to be.
So yeah, I wasn't until I really saw the writing on the wall that the time was right, especially because I had a kid and my wife wasn't working. Like, I really needed the stars to line up and tell me this is the moment. And they did. Cool. So that's what had happened.
I love that.
So Eric, where do you see yourself being in the future? I mean, are you going to start doubling, tripling still for the next infinite years, or what's your plan?
It's definitely not doubling and tripling again, since I did it that one time, but it has trended upward. So my big goal is always, I want to be ahead of where I was at the same point last year. That's my main goal right now. I mean, I'm dealing with, we have a major illness in the family that's taking a lot of time. I'm about to have baby number 3. So that's a big
Wow.
time thing as well. So I'm lucky to be at a point where I can make family a bigger focus than business growth. My
Right.
business is doing well enough that if it treads water, just a little bit of growth for the next year or so, I'm okay with that. At the
That's
same
awesome.
time, I'm building some scalable projects online. I have one called Community Sharer. That's an app for sharing either with your community or from your community online. So that's been underway for a year
Nice.
or so. And it's actually, I'm using it for some of my own social media. So it's up and working. But
That's
I really
very
want to
cool.
add more features before I give it the big online full push and start promoting it.
That's
And I have
awesome.
another idea for a finance app in my back pocket, but I think I'd need to raise about $1 million in VC money to make it happen. And I'm not ready to give up that much control over something I'm doing
Right.
to take investment dollars just yet. But hey, maybe someday. I
Yeah.
won't say never.
Very cool.
But I definitely, my wife's uncle was a CEO, I think, of a Fortune 500 company, a company you guys definitely have heard of. And one time we were sitting down. He's the most successful guy I know personally. He flew to my wedding in his jet, not like a shared jet with other people. So
Wow.
I was talking to him at Thanksgiving years ago, and I still had the job. And I said, what was your big secret to success that brought you to a point where you could, make what you did and be the CEO of this giant company with tens of thousands of people? And he said, well, you either have to be making something or selling something. And I thought, well, I'm not doing either in my cubicle. With my online business, I'm doing both. If you're running any business, you're in sales, whether you like it or not.
Right.
So don't start a business unless you want to do sales. It's just hand in hand. So I got to the point I was both making and selling, and I said, all right, Uncle Dave, what's next? And he said, well, does it scale? So that's the phase I'm on right now. Does it scale? So I built this business that I'm almost living what my retirement dream is. I work on something that I love and enjoy. I feel like I'm helping people with their money all day, and I get paid for it. So it's a great place to be. But of course, it would be nice to not have to work and still get paid. So that's what scale means to me. So that's what I'm working on.
I love that.
That's awesome. So, Eric, we're going to jump into our Moments of Truth segment here. It's the same 7 questions we ask all our guests, and we're just going to kick it off with the first one. Who is your success role model?
So Warren Buffett is the first one who comes to mind. I've been to 3 Berkshire Hathaway shareholder meetings. When I lived in Denver, it was about an 8-hour drive. And I just think he's brilliant. The value investing theories that he runs his business on are, I just agree tremendously.
Yeah,
he's a sharp guy, that's for sure.
Yeah.
His net worth is proof of it.
Yes, yeah. If I end up, second richest guy in the world,
I wouldn't be too mad about that.
Yeah. What is your biggest success?
I'd say I want to say my kids, because they're, if you're a parent and you don't think your kids are wonderful, you're doing something wrong. I think my kids are the best thing. But in business, I'd say just being able to leave my job and work where and how I want has been my biggest success.
Yeah, that's huge. That's huge. What's a typical day for you look like?
I usually get up around 7:30 with no alarm. It's usually my kids that get me up, or the sun.
That's
which
your
is
alarm
great.
right there.
Yeah, I hate alarms. Being able to wake up without an alarm is like the best thing in the world. I usually then help get the kids ready for school around 8:30, 9 o'clock. I am behind the keyboard and working for most of the morning and into the afternoon. Sometimes it's cool because being a freelancer, last week I worked in Denver all week. I was out visiting my parents. The week before I was home. A month ago I was at a conference. So typical day, every day isn't typical. The typical one, boring morning. My commute is down the hall to the office where I'm sitting right now.
Yep.
I spend on an average day, I'd say 7 to 9 hours working, but it really is flexible. Some days, I feel like at 1 o'clock, I'm just, I'm fried, I'm done for the day, and I can be done.
Yeah.
Some days I'm feeling it and I'm in the zone, and it's 7 o'clock, and my wife's like, come on, let's let the kids in. And I'm like, no, I'm writing an article. So when you have the flow, you got to go with it, because then the days you don't, that's all right.
That's what
usually I'm done around 5:30-ish. Where I then commute down the hall to the kitchen for dinner with my family.
I love it.
kids go to bed around 7:30 and then Netflix and hang out with my wife and not think about finance for a couple hours.
Nice.
All that freedom.
Can't have any of that freedom in cubicle-land, right?
Yeah, cubicle-land. You leave when they say and you come home when they say.
That's exactly right. What's your favorite quote?
I think my favorite, I don't know if I love the guy who said it because he was an anti-Semite, but Henry Ford said, if you think you can or if you think you can't, either way you're right, or something very similar.
I love that quote too.
I absolutely agree.
Yeah, that is a really, really good quote. It just shows about mindset and the power of just what thoughts are going through your head.
Yeah, totally.
What are some of your hobbies?
I have a lot of hobbies. I don't get to spend as much time on them as I used to. I have my private pilot's license. That's
Awesome.
one of my favorite things. It's really expensive, so I don't do it a ton. I also, once upon a time, was a nightclub DJ. Occasionally pull out my DJ
cool.
gear. It's sitting over there. But most of the time, I've been a home brewer in the past, made my own beer. These days, it's mostly birthday parties for kids between 2 and 5 years old.
I'm sure you can brew some home beer for the parents there, right?
There's usually we have the birthday party. Ours is coming up this weekend, so I got to go pick my beer. I don't have enough time to make it for this party.
Well, then you can DJ for the kids. And how about
totally?
that?
I DJ'd the Purim party at the synagogue last year, dressed as a banana. That was fun. All the kids were. Yeah.
That's hilarious. What's the best business book that you've read?
There's a few favorites I have. I don't always like to pick a favorite. I like a few favorites. So one I mentioned earlier, The Art of Nonconformity. That was a great one by Chris Guillebeau. It's not totally about business. It's more about the lifestyle to have the business you want. And then I'm going to throw out another one that's not really about business, but has inspired my business more than anything. And that's The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. So it's a novel. It's really a story about following your dreams. Mm-hmm. And when I finished, it's the only book I've read more than once. And I've read it three and a half times. Once I lost it on a plane, so that's why there was a halftime. But I think I read it 3.5 times. And each time I finish it, I'm kind of like scared. Like, because wow, I can change my life and I can do that next thing. Yeah, it was scary to leave my job, right? That's a scary thing. Yeah. And it's scary to realize that you can make such a big change. It's really comfortable and safe being the way we are. So 100%. Both of those two books, when I finished them, I was like, it's okay to be scared that my life can be different because it can be different in a good way.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's a great interpretation. So last question here. If there's one key piece of advice you could leave our listeners with about achieving success, what do you think it would be?
I'm going to go back a few minutes in our discussion. It's that focus on what works, whether you want it to or not. Like I said, I thought I was going to be like Pat Flynn when I grew up, and I turned out being like Eric when I grew up. And being Eric is awesome. I'm making great money. I'm living the life I want, and it is not exactly what I planned, and that's okay. And whatever I have planned next, who knows? It might not work exactly the way I have in mind, but some of the biggest businesses we've heard of pivoted in a major way at some point, and it's okay to pivot yourself. So just recognize and be objective about what's working well, and rock and roll. Keep doing that thing.
That's awesome.
Yeah, the plan's not always going to work. So, but it, like you said, it pivots. But Eric, how can our listeners get in contact with you? What's the name of your blog? How can they get
definitely
awesome information you're putting out there?
So if you are already listening to podcasts, you might like mine. It's called the Personal Profitability Podcast, anywhere you listen to podcasts. And my website is personalprofitability.com. And before we leave, I have a giveaway, a freebie for all the listeners who hung out with us till the end here. If you go to personalprofitability.com/bootcamp, I have a free week-long course that gets you started on your path to personal profitability.
That's so cool. Yeah. Thanks for giving that out. Yeah. That's good stuff.
So, but Eric, we appreciate you being on the show today. And for our listeners, go to that link that he just said to get your week-long boot camp. And, also subscribe to our show too, so you're not missing any of our daily episodes and any of the free giveaways that some of our guests might be giving away. And follow us on Facebook too at facebook.com/groups/wealth junkies. Again, Eric, we appreciate you being on the show.
Thanks for having me. It was fun being here.
Yeah.
Yep. Thanks, Eric. See everyone tomorrow.